I remember one of the last times my father ever heard me speak. I was at a place called Forte. I was speaking at a family camp, and there he was in the front row with tears streaming down his eyes because I was living the dream that he had hoped to live himself.
Welcome to the Say Goodbye and Imagine podcast. Thank you for joining me today. We are taking a little bit of a turn on subject matters, and we are dealing with what it looks like in a family setting when alcohol becomes a significant problem for, in this case, a parent, and in my guest case, his father. I'm going to let him tell you his story. But before we begin, I wanted to ask you that if you're enjoying the content here, like it, follow it, and share it. That's how others find out about the work that we're doing, and continue to find healing pathways to this problem that we call alcohol. Um, Jack is a very special guest because he was a pastor of mine many, many years ago. I think, let's see, my son was an infant when I started at your church in San Diego called Canyon Springs. He's no longer there. He's retired. I'll let him tell you a little bit about that. My son, Jack, is now 27 years old. So
Long
I,
time.
I've known you for 3 decades. Um, Jack was kind enough to be the first host of my podcast and interview me and find out, like, dig out a little bit of dirt on me. And now we get to return the favor. That's what Jack and I do. And find out a little bit of dirt. No, not on him, but you did mention, Jack, that in your sermons about your father and his alcohol problem. So I want to just thank you for coming on and being willing to share this story with us because it's an important one. It's an important one that people want to hear about. I have people of all ages, and they may have had a parent with alcohol problems, and they may not understand or really dig deep about how their children are getting affected by their drinking habits. So thank you, Jack, and welcome.
Well, this is the first I'm hearing that we're going to dig up the dirt on me. Wow.
I'm
There's
gonna cry.
plenty. There's plenty. So,
And that's what we love, my personal thing is I love when pastors are authentic because I think the worst thing we could do is stand up on the pulpit and say, I found God, everything is perfect, because that's where people get messed up. That's where people struggle because they're not feeling the same way. And that's my story, right?
mhm.
I love Jesus. Why aren't things fixed?
I'm I've found Jesus at 14. I'm 62, semi-retired. And how is it that I keep finding things that I need to improve and work on? But when am I going to get to that place where it's easy? I haven't found that yet.
Yeah, well, God keeps, I have to memorize the place of this, maybe but God will continue to do a work in you until he returns, which
Yeah,
means,
I feel like if I was a good pastor, I'd be able to quote that for you.
well, we all find different verses, but that one is important for me as well because
Yeah.
he's always doing a good work in me. And,
hmm
if we think we've gotten there, then we're fooling ourselves.
Yeah, there's a verse that says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" So that's where we're going. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter that your current situation does not determine where you're going. It only determines where you start.
Right. Love it. Love it. All right. Well, let's dig in, Jack. I want to first just ask you about, because again, you have shared on the pulpit that you
Sure.
grew up in a home where there was a lot of alcohol. What was that like? Can you share a little bit of a picture of what that?
Yeah. So it was my dad, and he was drank, and every time I would see another can of Rainier ale, I can still close my eyes and see the green can. I knew that my life was going to be that snow globe again, and that he was going to, you know There are times I walked past him and he didn't even recognize me. There was a time my mom had to wear sunglasses for a week because she got hit by my dad. I came downstairs once and he took a coffee mug and threw it against the wall out of a fit of rage. I think the time I remember the most, I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, and I woke up, didn't know what woke me up, but I went downstairs and my mom was trying to talk him out of killing himself. He had a gun in his hand. What I didn't realize was that what woke me up was the gunshot into the ceiling, below me. So, and I'm, recovering from all that. I'm only trying to context to say, yeah, it was real. It wasn't the happy drunk you see on a sitcom holding a beer in his hand.
I didn't, I mean, yeah, that is a little bit more severe than I had imagined when you said drinking problems and a gun
Yep.
into the ceiling when you're right above him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. Sure.
Um, how did that affect you, Jack? How,
I was the single shyest human being. I know this is going to shock you, because I have been described now as a serial extrovert.
mhm.
But I was the single shyest human being that there was. I don't remember really any close friends throughout my first, yeah, up through junior high. Uh, Interesting that I ended up going into ministry, and I ended up working with my third grade teacher, and she was the one that was. I have pictures of myself. Every picture looks like that picture that when you see the pioneers looking off at the 1850s, nobody's smiling. It's that 100 mile stare. That was me. It just had that fear. There was a party I remember going to. My friend Davey had moved away, and then I went to his house for his birthday party. It was maybe a year after that. I think they just invited me because I used to live across the street from him. I remember literally hiding behind a chair while all the other kids were playing.
Hmm.
So that was the I could still take myself back to those moments.
Yeah, those are some big ones. And so where did faith come into your life? Or were you a Christian? Were you brought up in a Christian home? That's a pretty important question because we view these Christian homes as, model, leave it to
Right.
them.
Yeah.
And they're not. There's lots of secrets and suffering going
Hmm.
on in Christian homes. So were you brought up in a,
I was not. My parents went. They were. What pastors would call creasters. Christmas and Easter only. That's when they'd
CEO?
show up, right?
Yeah.
CEOs. Um, so we went to a Methodist church, but nobody really had faith until my oldest sister went to a Calvary Costa Mesa and found Jesus, and then the first person that she shared with was my father, and my father came to faith
How
before I did.
old? How old was she and you?
She That's a great question. She's 13 years older than me, so she was probably in her mid 20s.
Oh,
I was closer to junior high when all this transformation happened, but it was my dad, then my mom, then my sisters, and I was the last one. I was a sophomore in high school.
it's crazy to see how Jesus can work in families.
Yeah, yeah,
And
right.
I think even for me, Jack, and you know this more than anyone else, it was I was just trying to play this game. I don't know if it was a game. It definitely wasn't a game, but I love Jesus. I was a servant at the church. But in my home, I wasn't as convicted. And I look back, and if I could have done anything differently, I think it would have been don't worry about the consequences, like be all in.
Yeah.
I was just so worried about what happened in my house and the consequences of me being all in with my faith. And it sounds like all in worked pretty well, right?
Yeah, what something you said though, like we're all in the process of getting more all in. Like I said, been a believer for a very long time, but I'm always finding other areas that I've kind of held back that I have to keep going. So wherever you're at, just maybe go a little bit more all in than you have been, and see if God's faithful in that.
Well, and I think that you find other areas to be all in at by being in his word, right? And that's what I mean.
Yeah, sure.
It's not about perfection, it's about him speaking to you and going, Roseanne,
Yeah.
I think it's time for you to deal with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Stop being the one who's like a friend who's a comedian who gives this whole bit about people who have a bumper sticker that says God is my co-pilot, or and go, what kind of great driver are you that God calls shotgun when he gets in? Let him drive,
Oh,
you
good.
know,
Amen. Amen.
let him drive. So that's the point, right? Like you have to just keep letting him drive
Yeah.
instead of you calling all the shots.
So what happens then? Dad finds Jesus, and
Yeah.
what happened? What did you notice?
So, boy, this will go old school for some people. I was at a Keith Green concert, and he was just an amazing musician, but really a prophetic voice. And I didn't like the concert, but I felt God calling my name, so I went forward. And I just knew that God would use me. So over the course of time, I just became more and more myself. And then when I was in college, I went to Biola because that's where my sister went, the Bible Institute of Los Angeles. And I started to help out in ministry. I showed up for a junior high meeting, and that day they introduced me as a Sunday school teacher, which just shows their level of desperation to work with junior high kids. And then I started getting paid to do that. And I told you I ended up working with my third grade teacher. And
Right.
one day she looked at me and she said, Jack, I can't even believe you're the same person. And, that's really the hope, because we're talking to people that have drank. We're talking to people that that maybe the one that shot the gun or threw the coffee mug or made the statement to their child. Look, I do what I do not in spite of my past, but because of my past. God got a hold of it and has developed within me a great compassion for people that struggle, and not just people that are grew up with alcoholic parents, but alcoholics and people who have used drugs or porn addicts or whatever. Look, we're just all struggling. And the most important thing in our life, we got one thing. The one thing that's most important is that you find a relationship with Jesus.
Hmm.
Because we're all broken here on earth, and someday we're going to be put back together. But if we find him, we start that process. That's it. That's number one.
It is, and it is the key to unlocking the peace that we're all looking for,
Mm, yeah.
despite circumstances, because life swirls around us. And I don't know about you, but I shut a lot of my like devices off because everybody's talking to try and influence me in a very bad way, right?
Hmm.
Very intentional on my focus on who I listen to and who I get information from,
Yeah.
and that is a very joyful walk, you
You use the word peace, and that right there is the struggle.
know.
That has been the lifelong battle when you are raised in this. There's a verse that says, have no fear of sudden disaster or the ruin that will overtake the wicked, for the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being snared. Sudden disaster. When the green can of Rainier Ale showed up,
Mm-hmm.
sudden disaster. Your life's a snow globe, and all of a sudden it shook up. Well, the time comes when I lost my dad over 30 years ago, when that's not the thing that shakes you up. It's a financial problem. Your transmission goes out. You wonder what you're going to do for work. We transitioned to Arizona a year ago, and my life was a snow globe again because everything was new. It's that learning how to find peace. That's it. That's the key right there.
Yeah. And I like it. I like what you said about putting God in the driver's seat because I've never had more fun not knowing, you
Mm,
know what I mean? Because we're all so focused on navigating our future. And I just wake up and I go, well, which direction do you want me to head in
yeah.
today? And it's so much more fun to live life that way. And he shows up. He just shows up. Uh,
Yeah. Did you ever have one of those station wagons that had seat that faced backwards?
no, nope.
We did. So that you get a completely different vacation. We're sitting backwards in the back, right? Um, and I think that's where God wants us to be, right? Like He's driving, and we can trust the driver where He's taking us.
Yeah.
And your situation where you've had to battle this, and I know your situation with your husband and all that, has put you in this miraculous spot of helping people in their recovery. That's what He does.
Romans 8:28. God will use every piece of your story for his purpose.
Yeah,
And
He won't waste your pain.
no, and that's why we're all motivated to do what we do, because it's why let that pain just be pain? We can help
Yeah,
others with it, you know.
yeah, that's right.
Well, what happened with your relationship with your dad, as he found Jesus? How did it heal, or was it a little rough, or what was the
Yes, it did. The internal stuff takes your
well,
lifetime to heal. It just does. But the relationship got better. My dad, once he found Jesus, he thought he wanted to be a pastor, so he wanted to go to seminary. Only problem was he didn't like people. Like if he could pastor dogs, he would have been amazing. But he started to collect theology books,
Hmm.
and he actually left an artifact in each of the theology books, which I ended up with. He pulled me into his room one day, and he said, "Hey, I have bought this stamp. You just stamp each page of your book, the first page of the book, so people know it's yours. And the top says Jack Hawkins, which is his name and my name, but
Hmm.
his middle initial was different. It's JWH, Jack Wayne, and I'm Jack Douglas." He says, "Every time you open a book, I want you to know that I'm collecting these books for you, but I want you to remember." It was this great artifact that he left. Um, I remember one of the last times my father ever heard me speak. I was at a place called Forest Home. I was speaking at a family camp, and there he was in the front row with tears streaming down his eyes because I was living the dream that he had hoped to live himself. So I know my father was a fan, and over time, I have learned to forgive, to understand not only my pain, but his pain, what he's walked through.
Right. Well, and did he ever explain, probably not given the error, but do you know why he drank?
I can only surmise, but like he had every reason to drink. His dad left when he was 2 years old, grew up in the Depression. His mom couldn't afford him all the time, so he'd go from foster home to foster home. Every school, he faced a new bully and had to beat him up. His mom was not a very loving woman. So then he went to the military. That's another place he learned relationship.
And, well, you learn relationship and drinking in the military. They actually encourage drinking and smoking.
he
So,
was a he was a corpsman, and so he was in charge of collecting all the beer. They would send the beer to this little island of Anahuac, and some guys didn't want it, so they just collected it. And they decided one day they were going to just start the day drinking, and nobody made it to noon. But that's one of the stories that I got from his military service. So absolutely. So then he got married. Had no idea how to be in a relationship with my mom. And he was very, very highly motivated, intelligent. He owned his own business. He owned a shoe store, which was, the size of a Walgreens, is enormous, and was very successful. And she was not educated, and they were just not. They did not blend at all. All I remember is them fighting. After he found Jesus, they fought only 60% of the time, right? um,
well,
so
he didn't miraculously have the skills, right? You have to develop,
no,
have to work
yeah.
at them, and yeah. But you bring up a good point, and I love the compassion that you show, as a child of your father and as a child of your heavenly Father.
Yeah.
Um, that most people drink a lot. I don't know the statistic, but most people drink to self-medicate some
Sure.
unresolved pain. And And I understand that, right? That's what I'm trying
Yeah.
to take the stigma away from. It's not a character flaw. It's something that society has encouraged us to do. It's socially acceptable. And it's not only socially acceptable, you're questioned why you choose not to drink. You know, Uh,
Right.
it's crazy. Like, well, why don't you use cocaine? Like, because it's a
Right.
because it's a drug,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And trying to bring some stuff into the light there. So you it sounds like you healed.
Yeah. We are. He only met one of my children, um, and he died at 68. He died a day before the birthday that we share. We were born on the same day.
Wow.
Yep. Yep. There's a there's a quote that, as you're talking, it reminded me, and that is, a little boy cries from the wounds of his father, but a man cries for the wounds of his father, meaning that once you grow up, you understand the wounding that he went through and why he did what he did. I long to see him again when he's restored. I have this great hope in heaven that he's going to be, fit, and his mind's going to be sound, and he's going to be all put back together, and I'll be all put back together. I long for that day. Um,
Yeah. So what advice would you give for people listening that may be a parent that is drinking in excess, and you don't have to get to the point where you have a gun and shoot it through the ceiling to create some pretty, you know, some pretty big scars in your child's life. But how do you, how would you suggest to the audience, to start repairing relationships?
mm. Well, for one, my kids didn't grow up in a family of alcohol.
Right.
But there are still things that they had to grow up and deal with because they're a family of a pastor. And my own wounding, there's, we do tend to hand off our hand-me-downs, right? Right. So the beginning starts with choosing better clothes, right? Like you have to deal with your stuff. And I mean, I think that's probably true of anybody in any relationship. If When I was a pastor, a couple came into my office and he could only talk about all the things she needed to improve, I knew that marriage was never going to make it.
Hmm.
But if you walk in saying, okay, what is it that I need? What is it that I can improve? Like if you're drinking, you don't have anything that you can give back. You're just continuing the scarring, you're continuing the abuse, you probably don't even recognize it. You think it's a vacuum, but it's not being done in a vacuum. The people around you are being hurt. So, what God longs to give you is freedom from it and peace. Um, I think that's one thing I would want to tell people about this relationship with God that they miss, because Christians make it about to-do lists. I got to read enough. I got to pray enough. I got to give enough. I got to cut my hair. I can't watch Game of Thrones. Like if I do all these things, or if I hit the Christian to-do list, then I'm good. That's not it. You get close enough to this God who sees the best in you and wants to bring out your best, and then He brings a peace into your life. Um, you want peace in your relationships. You can't have peace in your relationships till you have peace in your soul.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Because and I use the analogy of, you know, you always have to put your oxygen mask on first,
Right, right.
right? And it's a big, it's a big deal. I just had this conversation with a cousin of mine who was visiting here, from California, and she was sacrificing everything, her exercise routine, everything, every self-care thing, because her, um, she had a family member she had to care for. And I said, you can't. I go, you can't, because you're going to be drained and have nothing left to give everybody.
Mm,
And what you're saying and what I'm saying is you and God first. Have him fill you up, because then, you can fill others up. If you're drained,
yeah,
there's nothing to give. And I
yeah.
if I reflect on my own path, certainly when I was a member of your church, I was giving, right? And I don't know, Jack, you're the third party. Maybe I was doing some good, maybe I wasn't. But now, now I'm an evangelist.
This is what, yeah.
It's a little different. And I just, try and assess how filled up was I really. I mean, I know I had Jesus. I know I made impact, but the impact I make today is so much different,
Yep.
because I was just giving and it was the same thing. I was just giving too much of my story of myself and not focusing on filling up.
Well, we never make a big impact because we're so great. Just, just like read through the Bible. No, he never picked somebody because they were better and taller and faster and smarter and better than everybody else. He picks them because he picks them. But you, whoever you are, when joined with God, can do the amazing, right? You on your own, you might be able to pull yourself up. There's really smart people listening to you right now. And they might be able to do X amount of things. That's great. But you just never know the kind of impact you have until you give him the keys, let him drive. He's the one who's in charge.
Um, yeah, this is great. And Jack, you wrote a book. You're finishing up your book.
That's right. I just got the last. And by the way, yes, I did pay Roseanne to bring that
You did.
up. Yeah, it's really all about that struggle I had growing up with my dad. When you have this relationship with a father that's abusive and critical, and when you make a mistake, you feel like you're going to be criticized. What you just grow up scared. Then you come into this relationship with God. He's called our Heavenly Father. Well, that is not always a good leave a good taste in your mouth. There's a lot of people who have a difficult relationship with their father. I had to learn that my Heavenly Father isn't exacting. He's not waiting for me to screw up. He's not waiting for me to do something stupid so he can punish me, but that he literally delights in me. And so the name of the book is Your Picture is on His Refrigerator. So we moved out here because we got a grandbaby. My daughter Paige has the most, and just so you know, the most beautiful grandbaby. And don't even try to dispute that. It's not been disputed. Um, Let me tell you something. If Noah draws me a picture and it's of me and I got three eyes and I got two hands, but I got seven fingers on one hand and three on the other, and my hair looks all messed up and the proportions are all wrong, it don't matter what that picture looks like. I take a magnet, I put it on my refrigerator, because it's not the skill of the artist. It's not that she has all the composition right. It's that I delight in that child. And
Hmm.
this is how God views you. He delights in you. Your picture is on his refrigerator. So it's just 10 chapters on how I learned in certain areas of my life that God really delights in me and he wants my best. He wants to show me what matters. He wants to walk with me in the in between spaces when it's difficult. Um, he says, the Bible says over and over for us to fear him. Well, the reality is we fear people and we fear money. We have all these things that we fear. But when we put God first, when we prioritize him first, to fear him doesn't mean to be afraid. To fear him means to respect him enough to put him first, that our life comes together. So yeah, it's just reflections over this what I've walked through.
And if people want to get access, it's not published, you can't get it. But if people want to follow you, where would they do that?
Yeah, if they want to follow me, I have a blog, I have a podcast that I used to do for 4 years called 10 Steps Further. The book is on there as well. It's jackhawkins.net. It's my speaking website. So if anybody wants, a speaker just to connect in some way, jackhawkins.net. And I will actually, the first chapter, the first muddied up chapter is in there. I'm going to put the new first chapter in this next week so they can read the first chapter and kind of get an idea.
That's a good idea. I just wrote a book too. I'm going to put my first chapter somewhere.
That's right. That's great.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I had another question. I just wanted to get the book in there before I'm not done with our story, but this is something that you were talking about keyed me into something I think I just read this morning in Jonah. Haven't read, I'm trying to, I've been a Christian for 30 years. I'm sure I've read the Bible from cover to cover,
Yeah.
but now I'm being intentional. A cover to, I'm in a program, I'm accountable, 1.5,
Right.
so I just read Genesis for the first time in decades. Now I'm in Jonah. I can't remember the last time I read that. But I was reading something this morning about Jonah being mad that God forgave the city of Nineveh because they repented. And
Mm,
the reading just really showed me like I love these people. That's what you're saying, right? I love
yeah.
these people. These people were sinning and they were like being distant from me. And when and they went, "Wow, we have." And I guess maybe I didn't catch this the first time I read Jonah, but Jonah was mad.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
He wanted them to pay a price and get destroyed. And God's like, no, I love
Yeah.
them. I love these children. You know,
Yeah.
um, so
I think what you're taught, so I'm writing this book about all the lessons that I'm now learning about this heavenly dad that delights in me. And one of my editors said, "Have you ever written a letter to your dad
hmm,
thanking him?" And I was embarrassed that I had not. And so I'm sitting in this house that we moved in a year ago, and all the walls were painted, and this fireplace behind me I put up all the stone and the mantle and all that, all because of skills that my father taught me. In fact, some of these are with the tools that my dad actually gave me. And so rather than just thinking about all the hurt and pain that I got from him, I'm now trying to live into this gratitude for some of the things that my dad actually did give me, and it's healing my heart. Because and my dad never came to me and says, "Hey, Dad, or hey, Jack, I'm sorry I drank all those years. And I shot holes in the ceiling and punched your mom." He never did that. We sort of are waiting for that moment, right? Like when the alcoholic finally says, I mean, there are times when he would apologize when he was roaring drunk, the sobbing alcoholic apology, which of course meant nothing. Um, but for me, I had to get to that place for my own healing where I forgave and I started to see some of the good that my dad left me that that brought healing to me.
yeah, I love that. Such a godly pastoral perspective. No, but
Oh,
it really is, or, I, part of the program, the Choose Freedom program. No surprise, but there's 12 core concepts. One is about forgiveness of self, and one is about forgiveness of others. And I mean, people do things to us that we don't deserve, and yours is a perfect example. You were a child. You're supposed to be protected from your
yeah,
father,
that's right.
and instead you had to live in fear. But what I try and teach people is that holding on to that unforgiveness causes bitterness in us, and it's like the Lord's Prayer, like forgive us, or no, I like the trespasses. Forgive us our trespasses as we no, forgive us our debts. There's so many versions, but I use a different version for whatever point I
Yeah,
want.
right. Yeah, that's right.
Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So when somebody sins against us, they owe us something, right?
Yeah, right,
And sometimes we're not going to get it from them. And so I try and tell people that it's giving it's it's giving the debt to God and having him collect on it.
right,
Because you don't always get the apology or the remorse that you deserve, but God will make sure it's taken care of, right?
right.
And then you can remove the bitterness from your heart that's keeping you in the past, and
Hmm.
and be used by God and released from that to move forward and to peace and joy.
Yeah,
Instead, I mean, that forgiveness is just keeping a bitter root in our heart. And
yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know the Anne Lamott quote, right? that unforgiveness is like eating rat poison and waiting for the rat to
I don't, but thank you.
die.
I'm going to use that somewhere
Yeah.
somehow. Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. So let's just think about what kind of message do you want? I know I love your message about, especially if you had a father that drank. I have actually a lot of female followers, of course, because I'm female, and the female population is catching up in a roaring way. Alcoholism used to be a problem that was particular to men, but women are just almost,
Mm.
uh, you know, uh, equal with men in that area, and they're dying faster too because their bodies can't take as much alcohol. But what would you like to encourage people that are having this problem? I mean, is there any advice that you'd like to give them or reflection on our talk? How would you like to close this out, or is there something that you haven't said that you'd like to say?
Yeah. Whatever it is that you did, God is just waiting for you to walk back. The
Mm,
story of the prodigal is the story of a God who's just waiting. And this guy does everything he could possibly do to run away from his dad. But the moment he steps back, the father's waiting to throw him a party. That is always true. And it doesn't matter what you've done or who you've hurt. Today is the beginning. It, you're where you are currently at does not determine your future. It only determines where you start. So start here, start today, approach this God that loves you and wants to bring out your absolute very best, that who delights in you,
mm,
who not just doesn't just see this thing that you keep falling back into, but he sees all the great and potential of what you could do. And as far as if you're a parent and you feel like, oh man, I wish I hadn't done this to my kids. Look, man, we
join
all have that.
the
Everybody.
join the
I have
club.
I have not met anybody that doesn't feel that way. So my goal as a parent, I'm not going for MVP. I am just going for the participation trophy, right? I just want to participate with my kids. I want to be there as much as I can, as much as they'll allow me. If they'll let me take them out to coffee, then I do it. If they show up in my house and the conversation opens up, then I'm there. It's not always there, but whenever it shows up, I just want to participate. One of the things that we've been talking about is forgiveness. I never got my dad saying, I'm sorry, but maybe you want to start with that practice of writing down all the things that you feel like that you want to apologize to your kid for.
Mm,
And you may feel like it won't do any good. That's fine, but you will have confessed it. God, the Bible does talk about confession. It's not, you don't have to go to a priest, but you do have to go, confessing it gets it out in the open. It gives air to the wound. So don't just confess it before God, confess it before the people that you've hurt. And then, maybe that will begin the open door that begins to repairing of this relationship.
yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree more. There's just always hope as long as we're
That's
breathing.
right. Yeah.
Hope for something new, hope for something different. And any resources that you can think of that you use for healing? Obviously, your book is going to be a great resource, but
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, I have been to counselors and psychiatrists and you just can't be afraid to share your stuff. I have a group of friends. There are 7 other pastors that I get together with for 5 days every year for the past 17 years. And we just go and laugh and have a great time together. But having people like that you can be real with, authentic with, I think are super important things. So those are some of the things I do. I also have the single greatest wife in the world.
you do.
She's
I
amazing.
I like her. I don't like her. I love her, and you do. You have the most amazing wife in the world. Thank you,
Yeah.
John. Um, yeah, community is important. We talk, let's just summarize, what we've talked about. Community is so important. That's what the church is for. That's why the 12-step groups work. It might not be as much about the steps as it is about being in a community and bring what's in darkness into light and knowing that you're not alone in your struggle. Because the worst thing we could do in a church is to, and I think I was, I mean, this has nothing to do with anything, but small groups. I was in small groups where I felt like, well, why isn't that working for me? Why aren't I like
Yeah.
skating on ice,
Right. Right.
and just bringing stuff out in the open. We talked about the fact that you didn't even bring your kids up and with alcohol really present in the household, but we still got problems,
Sure.
right?
100%.
And
Yeah.
I started adding like alcohol statistically. I think it's higher than the statistics, but 11.3%. Um, Alcohol and drugs, 17%. That's almost 1 in 5. Well, let's
Yeah.
just add pornography,
Yeah.
gaming, gambling. Oh, wait, food?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
What percentage of our population, Christian or non-Christian, has an issue with a stronghold? We'll just throw it in the pot and
That's
call it
right.
a
Yeah.
stronghold. It's just more obvious when the stronghold is an addictive substance. It's got some pretty powerful negative effects. But we've talked about forgiveness. So if you're a child of somebody, we want to practice forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, and yeah, and understanding that God is not one that's God's wanting us to come home. God's wanting
Yeah.
us to be the prodigal son. So
Yeah. I had a buddy who came to our church because he went to the 12 steps, grew up in kind of Christian high school, and it was a really negative experience. So he said, look, man, he ended up driving home one day with his kid and had blacked out and doesn't even know how he got home with his child and realized this could have been really bad. So I'm going to do the 12 steps, but I'm not going to do the God part. And so a friend finally says, hey, why don't you try this church? And he goes, okay, I'll go to your church, our church, Canyon Springs, which met in a middle school. And then I'm going to go to a real church. And that day he found Jesus. And that was when the healing really began.
yeah,
So
it always is. It always is. Well,
yeah.
Jack, thank you for coming on. I think we need a third one to come up and talk specifically, maybe only about the book, if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
'Cause
Yeah,
that's,
let's get her published first.
yeah. Well, when do you think that'll be?
I'm actually meeting with somebody to help me brainstorm that, and hopefully within the next month.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Jack. Well, thanks for joining me and bless you and all you do and all the lives that you impact.
You too.